Hi guys. And I have this irrational fear of flying. I mean, I'm so afraid of flying that I'll do anything to avoid it, even if it means crossing the country by bus. This time though, there was no getting around it. My sister was graduating, and if I wanted to be there, I had to fly. Our parents couldn't make it because our grandma was sadly in the hospital. So that meant I would be flying solo. And so here we go. It was my first time flying on my own, and I think everyone in the airport could tell. I was sweating so much, I thought the airport security would pull me aside. As I got on the plane, I started shaking, and only once I was safely in my seat with my seatbelt on did I start to calm down. I thought I'd get lucky and score a whole row to myself, but as I thought that, a young guy sat down next to me. Damn. Well, at least he was cute. Maybe this flight wouldn't be so bad after all. Before takeoff, we had a slight delay, and the young guy next to me seemed equally nervous. But as soon as we took off, he relaxed and turned to me to start a conversation. His name was Brady, he said, and he was heading west to meet up with some friends from his college days. Oh, so he was older, I realized. No way would my dad let me date an older guy. Then I stopped myself. Why was I even thinking these thoughts? I barely knew the guy. He could tell I was anxious, so he touched my arm and said, "Don't worry, this is a pretty good airline." Then he kept asking me questions like where I was going and what college I went to. I lied and I told him I was a freshman in college. If he knew I was still in high school, there's no way he would be interested. We ended up chatting for a good few hours and I gave him my number. He said it'd be nice to grab a drink together during our time on the West Coast. I fell asleep with a grin on my face. I had successfully boarded my first solo flight without having a panic attack, and I even bagged myself a date. Jackpot! After a while, I woke up and I noticed Brady was nowhere to be seen. He must have gone to the bathroom. I reached into my bag for some mints and remembered I'd bought a newspaper. I didn't normally have much interest in reading them, but I was going to be doing an internship later that summer with a local newspaper as I was planning on studying journalism, so I thought I better swat up on what was happening in the world. I flicked through the first few pages. Nothing of interest caught my eye, and I decided I'd watch a movie instead. But then, just as I was putting the newspaper away, I spotted something. There was an article about a serial killer on the loose, and I kid you not, the mugshot of the killer looked exactly like Brady. But it couldn't be. I mean, the photo wasn't very clear, but it seriously looked like him. The more I looked, the more I realized it was him. I could feel my heart rate speeding up, and I knew what was coming next. I was going to faint. I was seriously panicking. I'd just given my number to a serial killer. I pressed the emergency button above my seat, and an air hostess rushed over just in time to see me slip off my chair and fall into a heap on the floor. The next thing I knew, I was laying down in first class with a jug of water in front of me. As I came to, I told the air hostess that there was a serial killer on the plane and that she needed to tell the pilot to stop the plane immediately and call the cops. The air hostess clearly didn't believe me. She told me I had fainted and that perhaps I was just delirious. She ordered me to drink some water and assured me I'd feel better in a moment. But I was seriously freaking out. I refused to go back to my seat, and I was paranoid. I kept expecting to see Brady coming up the aisle to look for me. What would I say to him? The air staff started to get quite impatient with me, and they told me that I could get in serious trouble if I didn't comply with their rules about going back to economy. But there was no way I was going back to my seat. Eventually, we landed after what felt like hours. I was about to ask the air hostess if she could help me get to my bag, but then I heard a commotion and noticed there were police officers and security guards entering the plane. And then there was Brady being escorted off the plane. Turns out he really was the serial killer, and one of the air hostesses had secretly believed me and made the call before we even landed. If I hadn't brought it to their attention, who knows what would have happened? And if I hadn't bought that newspaper, I may well have found myself on a date with a serial killer. And then who knows if I'd even be alive to tell this story. I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak to strangers, but just be careful who you trust. And if you have a feeling that something isn't right, always speak up about it. You never know, it might save your life.
Hey, I'm 15, and I have a disease called CIP, which stands for Congenital Insensitivity to Pain. This means that I don't feel pain like you do. In fact, I've never been in pain, and I have no idea what it feels like. This is an extremely rare hereditary disease. My great-grandpa had it, and it skipped a few generations before it was passed down to me. I know you're probably thinking that feeling no pain sounds great, but I can assure you that it isn't as good as it sounds. We are meant to feel pain for a reason. It's there to warn us when something is wrong, whether it be a toothache, a fever, or when a substance is too hot. I've never been able to run a bath by myself. My mom has to run it for me and check the temperature. It also means that when I'm in the bath, I can't refill it with hot water in case I burn myself. I can feel hot and cold, but I have no idea what a burn feels like, or what being so cold your toes hurt feels like. I also have to cut up my food and let it cool down for 5 minutes before I eat it, so I don't burn my mouth. I don't even bother with hot drinks. I just stick to drinking juice. I watch my friends with curiosity when they accidentally hurt themselves. I just find their in-pain expressions so odd. My mom shut her finger in the trunk of the car and screamed before she walked off shaking her hand for at least 10 minutes. If I shut my finger in the trunk, I wouldn't even flinch, which is bad because it means I could cause myself more of an injury. My great-grandpa, the one who also had CIP, died at the age of 40 from heart disease. He didn't have any symptoms because of his CIP, so he had no warning signs that he was seriously ill. My parents are terrified that I will end up ill too and not realize it. They make me go to the doctors for a monthly checkup. There is no definite cure for CIP, although there are some experimental treatments out there. My parents have refused these, as they don't want me to end up feeling like a lab rat. They say it's up to me to decide if I want to try any when I reach 18. I have scars on my arm from when I was in a restaurant and spilt a boiling mug of tea on it, but because I didn't feel pain, I didn't flinch or put it under cold water. I once fell off a climbing frame and twisted my ankle, but continued to walk on it for the rest of the day. That evening, my mom saw my ankle was swollen and took me to the hospital. Turns out I'd badly sprained it and caused myself more injury by walking around on it all day. I was on crutches for weeks. I'm not allowed to take part in any sports for fear of hurting myself, and I don't use the cooker or the kettle. My mom has to tell me if I need to put sun lotion on or to wear a jacket. If it's really sunny, my mom doesn't let me go out at midday as she's worried I'll end up badly sunburned. Even though I wasn't meant to play sports, once at lunchtime, I joined in with my friends and played basketball. A boy tried to take the ball off me, and I was shoved hard onto the ground. He was staring at me open-mouthed, and some of the other kids were gasping at me. I looked down at my arm. It had popped out of its socket and was hanging there limp. I hadn't even realized. The boy walked with me to the nurse's room, and I sat down on the metal frame bed, all smiles. At least, that was until my body went into meltdown and I fainted. I woke up 3 hours later in hospital with my arm in a bandage. Needless to say, my parents were furious with me. When I was younger, some kids used to poke and hit me to see if I would flinch. I used to be covered in marks and bruises, and my parents were horrified. They complained to my teacher, who gave the entire school a lecture about the dangers of my condition and how their actions could have put me in hospital. Now that I'm older, I find that most kids try and steer well away from me in fear of accidentally harming me, especially since the arm popping incident. It makes me feel sad, but there's nothing I can do about it. My friend Kayla says I'm like a real-life superhero. I don't think I have a very good power at all. I'd much rather be able to have super speed or turn invisible. I do worry about my future. I hope I don't end up ill and not realize it like my great-grandpa. My condition makes my life difficult at times, but I'm not going to let it get in my way. I may not be a superhero, but I am me, and I will try my best to protect myself from injuries and have a normal life. Thanks for listening to my story. Like this post if you believe that we have to make the most of our lives regardless of the obstacles we have to face.
Bye!